Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome to the Housing Fundamentals program for the MFP Transition Center Transition Specialist. Today we welcome Valerie Brennan, who runs the Olmstead Housing Program. She's going to do this webinar for us. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you'd like to ask a question, you should have a box that has questions where you can type the question directly into, or if you prefer, you can use the raise your hand feature and we can unmute you so that you can ask your question out loud. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Valerie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just want to make sure that everybody also, if you're joining us by phone, that you just mute your phone so that we don't have any background noise and feed coming in. So we're going to go through a presentation today for Housing Fundamentals. As you know, my name is Valerie Brennan. I run the Olmstead Housing Subsidy program. We are going to talk a little bit at the end also about how Olmstead Housing Subsidy can help some of your folks that are looking for housing if they don't want to go through other resources that are available. But a couple of things before we do that. I think it's very important for a transition specialist to be able to locate housing for those participants who kind of want to go out on their own. And there's just a couple of things we want to go through, kind of called the housing nuts and bolts. So as we're all aware, finding housing is very difficult in any area of this state. It's also very time consuming. We want to take into perspective how long it takes to actually secure housing. When you're looking for housing for someone, anywhere from 2 to 6 months before you find something that actually meets that participant's needs. So we want to be aware of how difficult it is to locate accessible housing units in different parts of the state. So you should keep that in mind when we're talking to our participants about housing. We also need to start being more creative about the type of housing we're looking for, such as, living with a roommate, living with family as a support, doing perhaps a paid neighbors program, searching for a unit. We're going to go through some protections for people with disabilities. We're going to talk a little bit about fair market rates. I'm going to show you what that actually looks like so you have an understanding when we say FMR. Housing inspections, although transition specialists do not do them the same way Olmstead housing specialists do, it's always good to be aware of what it is that we should be looking for when we're checking out these units for our participants so that they're safe. And then basically relationships with the nursing homes, relationships with the participants, relationships with the landlords is huge when we want people to move out into the community. So before we even start looking for any unit, we need to know from the participant, what is it that you need to be able to live successfully in the community? Does that person need an elevator? Do they need roll-in showers? Do they need grab bars? What about the location? Is there accessibility to a bus line or their doctor's offices? Even a Medicaid cab, do they come to that area? We want to kind of explore all of those options when we're looking. Obviously, price is huge. Whether they're getting a subsidy or not, we want to make sure participants have enough money to be able to survive a month. And do they need a roommate or a family member or even support while living in their unit, such as a live-in aid? Because if they need that, the way you look for a unit is going to be different, because you're going to go from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom unit. So we always want to be aware of what is it the participant wants when they are looking for a unit. There's no point in us picking up apartments or looking at apartments that don't meet the participant's criteria. So some protections for people with disabilities. We all have heard about the Fair Housing Act. So landlords must allow disabled tenants to make reasonable modifications to their unit and common areas which are necessary in order to provide them use of the housing. Now, some modifications can and will be made at the tenant's expense. The landlord does not have to pay for that. There are some landlords who will say, if you're going to put in something such as a grab bar, you need to remove it before you leave. We want to talk a little bit about, if someone needs a reasonable accommodation, such as a service animal or a handicap parking spot in front of a building, that landlords do understand that that's a reasonable accommodation that they can make for these participants. And again, all accommodations made are at the landlord's discretion, as long as they're not discriminating, but it is at their discretion. A landlord may not want a permanent change made to the structure of their home. So some participants who need, say, a ramp going into the front door, a landlord may say yes to a portable ramp, knowing it can be removed at the end of the lease, versus a permanent structure ramp attached to the front door. So there are some ways that they can work with us, but we want to keep in mind it is a landlord's building still. So at their discretion, they can say yes or no to different modifications. So when we're looking for a unit, so we know what the participant wants at this point. We know that they want to live on a 3rd floor with an elevator and a roll-in shower. So now we're going to start to look, and we're going to say, okay, what location would you like to live in? Is there a different county you want to move to? Is there a different city? Is there a side of the city that you prefer to live in? Some are reasonable, and some may need some conversation about the location and the price in different areas, that they may need to look in specific areas versus what they actually want. So when we're looking for our units, we want to look at location and pricing. So pricing is huge. If they have a subsidy, whether it be Olmstead, NHTD, TBI, Section 8, they all have to stay within a fair market rate. So price is really something we have to consider when we're looking at these units. Participants that are receiving a subsidy pay 30% of their income towards rent and utilities, not 30% of the rent. So we want to make sure that they have enough money to be able to survive. So if someone's bringing in $820 a month and they want to rent an apartment without a subsidy for $750 a month, we might want to ask them to reconsider if that's a good choice to make based off of the amount of money that they would have left over for things like groceries, utilities, phones. So those are all things we want to be thinking about as we are going through this process with them. We want to work through a budget with each participant. Like I just mentioned before, we want to make sure that they have enough money to be able to continue throughout the month. So things we have to consider: utilities, transportation, food, personal products, cleaning supplies, all of those add up. When we're looking for a unit, searching the internet, obviously we know, is a very big part of how we find a lot of our units and complexes. So we want to make sure that we are looking on the internet. That is definitely one of the best places that we can look. However, we can also use any newspapers in the area, penny savers, advertisers. I even know, for those of us that are on Facebook, there's different local communities that you can join where landlords do post apartments for rent. So that's also a good resource for us. When you're meeting with your landlord and you're viewing the unit, you want to make sure any documentation that you need from them or to give to them, that you have it with you, because that is going to eliminate a lot of that back and forth between you and the landlord. Even if you're not sure you're going to take the unit and the participant is not sure, it's best to have the documentation with you. A lot of landlords want to have a picture ID. They might want to run a background check. So you want to have whatever it is that they're looking for before you enter the viewing. A lot of landlords do want to see where the income is coming from. That might be an award letter that a participant has. You might want to gather all of those documents prior to the viewing and bring it with you. Utilities are also a big expense. So you want to try look for a unit that has utilities included. But if it does not have utilities included, we want to kind of ask, well, how much on a monthly basis do you think it costs to heat this unit or to run the electricity? Landlords typically have a good idea from their current or previous tenants about how much that runs. We do want to really try to get some of that paid for, especially heat, because heat can be very expensive depending on the type of heat the unit has and how large the unit is. We also want to be able to have the participant reach out if they need any other assistance. So like HEAP, we could tap into HEAP when that becomes available to help them pay those utility bills. When we're meeting with our landlords, we want to build rapport with them. We want them to think of us as a recurring customer. So if they get one of our participants in and they see how well it works, that begins to build a relationship with them. So then down the line, you'll be able to go back to that landlord and say, we have so-and-so in this unit. Do you see how well this works? Would you be open to looking at someone else when you are experiencing another opening? Landlords love to fill their apartments as fast as possible. So if we can kind of say to them, well, we've got people, we're willing to house them, sometimes that helps with landlords. We can also attend landlord associations. We can present on our programs. We can explain to them who we are, what we can do. That's also very helpful when people don't understand the population that it is that we work with. A lot of people associate any subsidy or anyone trying to have housing placement with Section 8, and a lot of people have been burned by Section 8, so they don't want to deal with us. But if they can get out there to those landlord associations and we can present on these programs, or to those brokers or to those real estate agents, it'll be very helpful going forward. And continuous communication with landlords is extremely helpful. With the OHS program, we can tell a landlord, well, they'll have a housing specialist that's checking in with them once a month. We can be the go-between. So there are programs that do have more support involved. So as transition, you might say to them, well, they have aid services coming in. There'll always be someone in here helping them clean. Those types of things tend to sell landlords when we're working with them. So this next screen is a screenshot of fair market rate. So we refer to it basically as FMR. I've given you the website on here. I just chose, I believe that this is Albany County, but when you go on, you're going to choose your state, you're going to choose the county that the person's going to live in. So a lot of our folks tend to cross counties because they got stuck in a nursing home in a different county. You want to make sure you're looking at the FMR for the county that they are going to live in. So what FMR means, if you're looking at the screen under a one-bedroom, it shows you that the FMR for 2017 is $817. What that actually means is that includes rent and utilities. That's the full price that this, when looking at a subsidy, would pay. If you go over that, the participant has to pay the excess money. And you'll notice in 2016 that the FMR for a one-bedroom was a little bit higher, and it did drop. And that does happen every year. So every January, a new rate does come out. So this was just for you to be aware. You're welcome to use that website. Go on it yourselves, check out the different counties that you work in so you have an idea. I typically tend to print these out so I know when people are asking if this is an FMR, we can look it up really easily. So housing inspections, as part of the OHS program, we do housing inspections before the participant signs a lease. Transition specialists, I don't believe that they have to do a housing inspection, but it is a good practice to help ensure participant safety. We want to make sure transition specialists are seeing the unit. We want to make sure that the housing that we're moving these participants into is good for them and it's appropriate. If someone tells you that they need a roll-in shower and they want to be on a third floor with an elevator, and we're putting them in a basement apartment with steps and a tub that they have to step over that they can't access, doesn't sound like that would be the best housing option for that participant. So we want to make sure we're just kind of looking in each room, run the faucets in the unit, make sure the water's coming out, look at the windows, make sure they're not broken, ensure proper venting in the bathroom. And this is something that has come up for us a lot is, are there appliances in the unit? There are some landlords who will not provide a refrigerator and a stove and have their tenants bring them in with them. So you want to make sure that those are actually included. If there's any holes in the walls, asking the landlord to repair them. That's pretty standard. This is just a helpful tool. This is an apartment inspection checklist. This is just for you to use going forward. If you're going out, you are checking out apartments, you do want to kind of look around and make sure, that there are things such as, hand railings, if there's supposed to be one. Every room has at least a window. There's 2 exits out of the apartment if possible. If not, what's the person's plan to get out? So these are just a helpful tool for you. We're not saying you have to do them, but it is a good practice. At the bottom, I did put in there just kind of about garbage. Some landlords do charge the tenants for garbage removal. Some landlords expect the tenant to put the garbage out to the curb. So those are the types of things you just kind of want to look at when you're reading those leases to make sure that the participant can actually do those items when they're signing their lease. So building relationships in your community, we want to be open to new ideas about housing. There are many different types of housing in every community, from complexes to private landlords to people wanting to live with a roommate, to some people wanting to live, have a live-in aid. So we kind of have to be a little bit more open to what the participant actually wants for their future. Be prepared to discuss briefly the program in detail with landlords and stakeholders. So if you're going out as a transition specialist and you're trying to locate housing, it's best that you have a good idea of what the program is, perhaps bring some reading material on the program so that the landlords can get a better understanding of what it is you do and who you work with. Again, if we say we're a subsidy or the person's coming out with a subsidy, so they only have to pay 30%, landlords tend to kind of back off of those types of people. They have been burned in the past. They don't like it. They think the state or the government is coming in. They're going to have to make all these changes to their units. We just want to assure them that that is not the case. We want to talk with them about what it is that we actually offer these participants so that they just have a better understanding, and then that will help hopefully make them more willing to work with us. You can get involved with the landlord associations, as we talked about earlier, talking with any developers in your area, discussing programs with apartment managers. Talking with your public housing authorities is a great way to also ensure that you're on that Section 8 list. So every time Section 8 is available to take applications, if you have a relationship with your local PHA, they hopefully will add you to their email list and let you know when those Section 8 apartments are available for application. And don't be afraid to reach out to private landlords. I understand complexes are much easier to work with. They do have more accessible units, but don't be afraid of those private landlords who are willing to make a difference in the community and who are willing to make accommodations so that we can help more people out. There are many of those out there. We want to make sure that we are reaching out to those private landlords also. So a little bit about the Olmstead Housing Subsidy and how we can help and kind of work as a team with transition specialists. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Olmstead is, what we do, our structure, how to get referrals in, our eligibility, what a housing specialist actually does, forms needed for approval, and the discharge of OHS participants. So Olmstead and who funds this program. So Olmstead refers to the Supreme Court's 1999 Olmstead decision. And we are funded by the New York State Department of Health as a program of the New York State Medicaid Redesign Team. Most people know that as MRT. And NYAIL is the one who's administering the grant. So what does OHS do? Basically, we are a program that seeks to support those nursing home residents who can live safely in the community by assisting with the cost of rent and providing assistance with locating and obtaining housing. OHS is designed to mirror Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher programs, but we are not exactly the same. There are some things where we run slightly different than OHS, or I'm sorry, than Section 8. But the end result of OHS is to get a participant on Section 8. So in the end, if a participant goes to Section 8, the only thing that has to change hands is the voucher. So that's why we follow that FMR. That's why we follow the income eligibility, because we want to make sure that if a participant becomes eligible for Section 8, that basically the only thing changing hands is that 70%, just the money piece. The rental subsidy is intended to help seniors and people with disabilities leaving nursing homes. So where can we get a referral from? We can get a referral from transition specialists, from peers, from family, nursing homes, homeless shelters, landlords, self-referrals. Anyone can go on our website and pull a referral. We can also now accept referrals from NHTD and TBI. So what is the eligibility of Olmstead? I do get a lot of questions about somebody meeting the OHS eligibility. So 120 consecutive days in a nursing home, skilled nursing facility in the most recent 24 months. That is probably one of the sticking points for this program. If someone has been in a nursing home 112 days and they've discharged, we cannot assist them. We really have to meet that 120 days. If someone's in a nursing home 90 days and they're being referred, and we know it's going to take us 3 months before they come out, they will meet that 120 consecutive days. At that point in time, we can begin to work with them. Hospitals, prison, jail, rehab, psych institutions, they do not count for part of the 120 days. Participants must have Medicaid. They must be eligible for community Medicaid when they leave the facility. They must be unstably housed or homeless, meaning they have nowhere else to go. They have to be 18 and older with a documented chronic disability or 55 and older. If someone is already out in the community and we're looking at them for a diversion, they do need to have a uniform assessment system done, a UAS, and receive a 5 or higher to be determined for a nursing home level of care. If someone's currently in a nursing home, they do not need a UAS, as they are already defined as being at that level of care. So what does an OHS housing specialist actually do once you send that referral in? So they get the referral, then they make an appointment to meet with a person. They go out, they complete an intake with that person, meaning they ask a lot of questions about who that person is, where it is they want to go, what they're looking for in their housing. They want to talk to them a little bit about, do you have any back utility bills? Because that's a huge problem for a lot of our participants in trying to get that solved. Do they have money to come out with? Do they have support? Once they've completed the intake, they then begin to collect forms from a documentation checklist where we determine eligibility off of that. Once someone has been determined eligible for the program, then we begin to locate and secure the unit and complete that housing inspection. We then provide out to a landlord security and first month's rent. We also have community transition service dollars for our participants. A housing specialist also maintains monthly contact with each participant in the program on their case that has left the nursing home and living in a unit. They do that through phone. And then there's an annual unit inspection where about 45 to 60 days prior to re-signing of the lease, the housing specialist will go back out into the community and complete a housing inspection on that unit to ensure it's still safe moving forward. An OHS specialist can also assist with solving barriers. They can provide linkages within the community for services. They do also do outreach for the program, so they're out giving presentations to nursing homes on our programs. We have to maintain the database just like transition specialists do, and we become a resource for landlords. We currently have landlords who are reaching back to us saying, hey, I've got a unit available. Do you have someone that matches this? Again, building that rapport with landlords. So how can a transition specialist make a referral? Very easy. Our referral is very basic. If you don't have the referral form already, feel free to go into the database, go under the resources tab, select OHS resources, and there is the OHS referral form. You can fill that out on the computer and email it to the housing specialist. You can handwrite it and hand deliver it to a housing specialist. You can contact me. You can email it to me. You can email it to the leads in the area. Whatever works best for you in your process or your housing specialist in your center, you may want to ask them what their preference is. Then the housing specialist will add the referral to the participant's chart. The housing specialist at that point contacts the referent, sets up the intake. We do highly recommend from the Open Doors program and the Olmstead Housing Subsidy that the housing specialist and the transition specialist should have weekly to biweekly meetings to discuss progress of each case that you're working on together, perhaps job duties on the case, put notings in from the meetings in writing and email them out. We're finding that the best communication and the best cases that are moving forward faster are those that have really strong communication between both teams. Not one thing is anyone's job when it comes to transitioning our folks out. We are all trying to reach the ultimate goal of getting the person transitioned. So we really want to make sure we're working together and closely for the success of the participant. Who are the best types of people to refer? Those that you feel are able to leave with MLTC services. That was our primary focus when we started this program. However, that has changed a little bit. We are able to work with those folks who have NHTD waiver services or TBI waiver services. If for some reason they don't want to work with the housing side, they can work with OHS and they can be referred to us at this point. The most motivated to leave the nursing home, those participants seem to be the most successful. Those are the ones that are reaching out to landlords on their own. They're getting their forms. They're constantly calling you and checking in. Participants who are also compliant with their nursing home care, again, back to that motivation. We have participants who say they want to leave, nursing home saying, nope, they're not following through on their plan. We don't consider them safe. So we want to make sure that the participant is engaged with the nursing home and doing what it is that they need to do there to ensure a safe discharge. So as I mentioned before, we can now work with NHTD and TBI participants if they meet OHS eligibility. So they still have to follow all of our eligibility parts, so that 120 days, the Medicaid, the chronic disability or 55 and older, all of that criterion still has to be met. There's a couple of differences with this. Participants must use NHTD or TBI CTS funds prior to accessing OHS CTS funds. So if someone's coming from NHTD and they want an ongoing rental subsidy with OHS, they should reach into the NHTD program for their security and first month's rent. Now, there are going to be case-by-case instances where OHS may be able to step in and help, but again, that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. So with that being said, Now we've added another person to our mix, right? So now we have a housing specialist, a transition specialist, and a service coordinator who need to work together on the timelining of service plans with housing. So if NHCD service coordinator knows this plan is not going to be approved for 6 months, we're not going to start looking for housing once we've determined eligibility until that plan is going to be ready. So there's a little bit of coordination that's going to happen there. But all three are working together for the participant. Not one person should be more responsible than everybody else. We are all responsible for the same case. For OHS units, when we're looking for a unit, we want to make sure that the units are in fair market rate. The individual is required to pay 30% of their income and utilities if not included. They have to help us with the required documentation, meaning something like an award letter. We know every January the awards change. If there's a COLA, we need an updated award letter every January. So they have to comply with that as part of our participant agreement. They have to sign an annual lease with a landlord. We will not take a month-to-month. We will not take 6 months. We will not take 2 years. We will not take 3 years. It has to be a 1-year lease only. They have to sign the OHS participant agreement, and that basically means that they are going to maintain monthly contact with the housing specialist. They're going to pay their rent. They're going to pay their utilities. They're not going to be disruptive in the living environment. They must apply for and accept Section 8 when it's available in your area. Now, we get a lot of questions about Section 8. Well, it hasn't opened in 10 years. That's okay, but when it does open, they do have to apply and be on that wait list. And they should provide you with their receipt that they've applied. So community transition service dollars for OHS participants. There's a $5,000 participant lifetime amount. We do actually track everybody, the amount that's being spent on each purchase based off of the receipts that we get. But some of the things that we do cover under community transition service dollars, household furnishings. So anything from a couch to a table and chairs to a bed to cookware, glasses, knives and forks. But we really want to make sure we're only getting the basics that people need because that $5,000 goes out very fast. So we want to make sure that we are being very diligent in what it is that we are purchasing for each participant. We do have a list of items that we can purchase, and then there are some exceptions based off of each individual case. Security deposits, broker fees, utility deposits. So utility deposits can be confusing. We can help pay for a utility deposit for someone if while they were in the nursing home that was impacted. If it was prior to that and we have reached out to every resource possible and can show that we've reached every resource possible, DOH will take that on as a case-by-case again. We could do small EMODs, so grab bars. We do have some portable ramps that we have paid for. We cannot pay for anything that's a permanent structure change to the building. You would really have to reach out to the landlord or other resources to be able to complete that. We have paid movers fees for people. Some people have a lot of their belongings in storage containers. We can help move that stuff from the storage into their housing. And back rent is something that we can pay if back rent is due to the nursing home admission. So if somebody has a unit and they're at risk of losing it because they've been there for 4 months and haven't paid the rent, it is something that we can help if the landlord's willing to re-sign a new lease for that participant. Again, that's case by case. So community transition service dollars for one-time assistance is kind of a newer item that we have here with OHS. So participants who are already working with a housing specialist to locate units, and during that process, they get called for a subsidized unit, we can help them with one-time assistance, such as first month's rent and security within fair market rate, household items, and furniture. So the eligibility for one-time assistance, those participants must meet all OHS eligibility and have documentation in place. So even though we're not going to do an ongoing subsidy, they still have to meet our eligibility piece first. You need to have a letter in place stating the need for the one-time assistance. What does that mean? Well, that just basically means anyone involved in the case can write a letter stating this person cannot afford to leave the nursing home without a security deposit because the nursing home right now takes all of their money. So we want to make sure that we've got something proving that this person needs this one-time assistance, and without it, they cannot leave the nursing home. If someone's requesting rent or security, we need proof of lease. If the participant, we need proof of lease for anything, just to show that someone's actually going into a unit. If they need rent and security, we need a landlord W-9 form. Again, we have those on the OHS resources on the database if anyone's looking for that and they need it. And the reason we need that is because we're sending money directly to the landlord. We're not giving any money to the participant. We are sending it directly to the landlord. So that's it for my presentation today. It was my contact information if anybody has any questions. No questions have popped up yet thus far in the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and end this presentation. I believe it is recorded, and Suzanne will put it up for you.
So I'd just like to say thank you very much, Valerie, for doing this. And I'd just like to reiterate what she said, and that is that we really are working together, both the housing specialist and the transition specialist, towards the same goal. So to the extent that you have that relationship and you work well together, I think that's really the key to helping people transition out of the nursing home. So again, if there's no other questions, then we're going to close this down. And always feel free to reach out to Valerie or to myself if you have any questions.